Okay, so today we are going to talk about something that is very near and very dear to my heart, and that is the topic of DNFing. Don't worry, I'm going to explain what DNFing is, and then I'm going to talk to you guys about what made me want to do a video about DNFing. And then, I'm going to talk about my own experiences with DNFing as well. So, let's get right into this. The first thing that I want to discuss with you guys is what DNFing means. So, we have three letters, D, N, and F, and they stand for did not finish. In other words, you pick up a book, you start reading the book, and then you go, oh my goodness, I do not like this book, so I'm not going to read it anymore. That is DNF. Did not finish. And part of the reason why I'm here today is to talk to you guys about the fact that, in my belief, DNFing is not a bad thing, although it comes across as a bad thing. Like, I did not finish that book. Like, oh, okay. You didn't finish the book. You started it. Why didn't you end it? But there are many reasons to not finish a book. Actually, let's quickly clarify. There's a difference between two different types of categories for if you stop a book at a certain point. DNFing is when you put a book down and you don't go back to it. You did not finish it. There is another type of putting a book down, and that is you put a book down and you decide, okay, I'm going to put it down now, but I'll go back to it later. If you fully intend to pick up that book at a later time, then this is not called DNFing. This is called shelving. I just don't want to read it right now, so I'm just going to shelve it for the moment, but I'll get back to it next week, next month, somewhere down the road. That's not DNF. That is shelving. DNFing is when you give up on the book, you don't want to read it anymore, you're done, you're done. You're not going to read anymore. So now I want to talk to you about why I have decided to do a DNFing video and talk about it. I am a massive advocate of DNFing. Let's talk about my life. Young Mr. Francy, as he grew up in his household when I was younger, wasn't always the easiest of times because, as my mother liked to say, and I really appreciated it growing up, we are very rich in love. We're just not rich with money. That's how she would put it to us as kids. So financially, we were not well off, but we did have a lot of love to share. In saying that, because we weren't so well off, books were a rare thing. Because of the fact that we weren't so well off financially, there was the odd occasion where my mother would buy me a book, but it was very rare. Because of how much she had to put aside financially to be able to buy me a book, I appreciated the book so much. But my mum had a rule, and that rule was, I will buy you more books, it's just you need to finish the book that you have started. And I didn't really appreciate it back then, but I do now, because of the fact that she's spending money, and I'm reading a couple of pages and not wanting to read anymore. It's a waste of purchasing a book. So I get that. But then I grew up. And so last year I came across the terminology of DNFing, and I thought, it's a really good point. If you don't like a book, why keep reading it? Just put it down. And so that is something that I started to do. Not too much later, a friend of mine's son was going into high school for the very first time. Here's the deal. In Australia, I think it's different in the States, but in Australia, when it comes to English, which is where we do our reading in a class called English, it is not only compulsory for students to read, but no matter what level of education you are at, once you start in primary, in America, elementary, all the way through to the final year in high school, you not only have to read to be able to pass English, but the Board of Education, they actually choose a select amount of books that the school can choose for you to read. So you don't, as a student, go to the library, borrow a book and say, I'm going to read this one. You're basically told you are going to read this book, or depending on what year level you're at, these books for this year. And so with your set school list where you go off and buy everything that you need for school, included in that set school list is the novels that you need to read for English. So as I was saying earlier, a friend of mine, her child was going into high school for the first time, his first year, and he needed to read these novels. And I said to my friend, look, I love reading, so if you want, I'm happy to read the 2 novels that he needs to read, and then if he has any questions, I'll read them, then I can, help him out a bit here and there. And, she thought that was a great idea. He was really thankful to that as well. So I picked up those books. And if you have watched all of my videos, the books that I'm referring to, I read the first one, which was Once by Morris Gleitzman. I have to say, I did not enjoy that book as an adult, and I really don't think I would have enjoyed that book reading it as a child. With the Board of Education making a compulsory list for schools to choose from, and with schools narrowing that down to 1 or 2 books that each child must read in that year level, children don't get that choice of what it is that they're going to read. And if you are choosing for children, especially children who don't read, the books that they're going to read, and they don't like these books, you can see where this is going to go. They're going to hate reading. They're really going to find it a chore, and they're only doing it for the sake of schooling, and more than likely they're not going to want to pick up books again because in their experience they only read books when they had to, and they did not like these books. So you can see how there's an issue. And unfortunately, when you're at school, you don't have the option to DNF for books. One thing that I started advocating very early on in my booktube career is I'd love to be an advocate for change, especially in this country. I think things are a little bit different in the States, but especially in this country, I would love for the Board of Education to come up with a certain criterion of what they need the students to be able to show that they have experience through reading, but that they get to choose the book that they want to read themselves, provided it falls within that criterion. What I would love to do if I had that freedom would be to take my students to the library and say, you pick out a book that you want to read. However, it needs to be about 100 pages, let's say. So it needs to be more than 100 pages to qualify. Find a book that you think you're going to love, bring it to me, and we'll see if this works. And if it doesn't, I will assist them till we get to a compromise of a book that they will want to read that will fill my criterion. So one thing that I have issues with is that you don't have that option to DNF when you are going through your schooling life. And because I didn't have that option growing up at home because of, the waste of money that is to purchase books when you don't have a lot of money, and the same thing through my primary school and my high school, DNFing was a very new sort of thing to me. And when I first found out about it, when I first started my booktube career at the beginning of 2020, it was something that, I don't know, it was kind of like I was just smacked over the head with a plank of wood. Like, yeah, this makes sense. Why am I not doing this? Why am I not picking up a book, and if I don't enjoy it, say no and put it down? Why am I not doing that? Now I want to talk to you about putting it into practice, because I have done this. I don't remember how many books I DNF'd in 2020, but I'm going to guess 15. And let me tell you, this was one of the best things that I could do. Now let me rewind a little bit back to April, because I want to provide some context to this situation. In April, in order to celebrate a friend of mine's birthday that was coming up that month, I decided to read her favourite film series that originally started off as a book series, The Lord of the Rings. So, by the time I'd gotten to April, I'd gotten used to DNFing. But I said to myself, because I am celebrating a friend of mine's birthday and reading her favourite series, I am going to give all of these 4 books, The Hobbit and the 3 Lord of the Rings books that were originally sold as a 1-book bind-up, immunity. In other words, no matter what, I'm not allowed to DNF these books. I have to read all of them, and I have to read them cover to cover. The worst thing that I could have done, I'm so resilient with my love of reading, and I'm really glad that I am, because Lord of the Rings really could have made me stop reading altogether. I personally just wasn't a fan of it. I'm not here to say that you're not allowed to love Lord of the Rings. I'm not here to say that you won't love it if you haven't read it. But for me, it just wasn't my type of book at all. And the more that I kept reading, I was just getting more and more disappointed and continuing to force myself to read these books. It got me extremely frustrated that I got to the end of April and said, I am never doing this again. Every single book I pick up, I don't care who wrote this book, what this book is, what genre it is, how important people think it is. If I don't like this book, I'm going to DNF it. And let me tell you the difference between forcing myself to read those 4 Lord of the Rings books versus being able to have that option to DNF. Massive. Most of the time after I DNF'd a book in 2020, the next book that I picked up ended up being at least a 3-star read, if not a 5-star read. Like, most of the time they were 5-star reads. And yeah, so it always just kind of worked out for me. DNF a book and I pick up an amazing book right afterwards. It motivated me to keep on reading. And I guess that's the big solid foundation that I'm trying to build with this video. Is one of the reasons why I'm a massive advocate of DNFing books is if you continue to read a book that you do not love, your motivation to keep reading is going to go down because you're more and more disappointed by a book that you start off not loving, but then by the end you end up hating it. But if you DNF that book and start reading something else that you do love, that's going to motivate you to keep going. So it just makes sense that DNFing is a good thing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in April, for me, my struggle was Lord of the Rings. But, you know, even if people are talking about DNFing books that I love, like, what do you recommend I do? Push through or DNF? My advice would be DNF that book. Why force yourself to read something you're not enjoying? Even if it's something that I love, your taste and my taste may vary. In fact, there are no 2 readers who are going to have the exact same taste. There are booktubers that I've come across that I have a lot in common with them. I've even purchased books based purely on their recommendations because I love a lot of the things that they read, and I will DNF certain books that they've recommended to me, or they end up getting 1 star from me because I just really didn't enjoy them. No 2 readers are going to be exactly the same. But DNFing a book allows you to have that freedom to say, I'm not enjoying this, so why am I going to continue reading something that I don't enjoy? I'm going to put this down. If you're here watching my videos, I'm assuming that you are either someone who is A, interested in reading, or B, someone who loves to read, and booktube is something that either keeps you going with reading, maybe it's your social side of reading. Let's face it, you're most likely here watching my videos because you love to read. And let's be real, how much longer would you want to keep reading if you are forced to keep reading books that you don't love? Step number 2. And that is, I advocate DNFing. However, every time I DNF a book without fail, I straight away pick up another book and at least read 1 page. The reason for this is because I know that if I DNF a book and don't pick up another one for the rest of the day, that it may take me a while to pick up another book. If you do DNF, the best thing you can do to keep reading is to pick up your next book and at least read a page and stick your bookmark in there so that you've at least started your next read, your next project, rather than just DNFing and saying, I'll get to my next book when I get to it. Now, I was given some really good advice when I was in high school, and this was more on the musical side. So when I was in high school, among other subjects, I studied a subject called music performance, where I was doing a lot of singing because I loved, still do, but don't do it professionally, but loved in high school to sing. And part of what I loved doing with singing was writing my own songs. One day I spoke to a music teacher, my music teacher, about the songs that I'd written, and he would go over them and give me notes and things like that. At the end of that school year, he was leaving the school because he had gotten another job. And I was really upset about this because I'd come to really love this teacher who was extremely passionate and taught us all so much about music. And I said to him, you know, is there any advice you can give me before you leave? When I asked him this, I was on my own with him, and he said to me, the best bit of advice I can give you is to keep writing your songs, because the moment you stop writing, it is going to be extremely hard to pick it back up again, and you might never pick it back up again. So make sure you've always got at least a project going at a time. Even if you take a break, you've got one going. And unfortunately, I did get to the point where I realized that he was right, because I stopped writing and I have not written another song since. So he's right about that. And so I do have that mentality of if I stop for too long, I don't know if I'm going to pick it back up again. So that's why for me, if I DNF, I start another book, at least a page, so that I've got another project going. Then I can take a breath and do whatever else, but at least I've started another book. Rather than just sitting in that moment of, I've purchased a book or I've taken time to read a book and I don't like it and I hate reading and da 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 da. Rather than doing that, just shifting my focus. You know what? I don't like this book. I'm putting it down. Let's pick up the next one and go from there. And it has really helped me. So I hope that, I'm well aware that this video has been kind of all over the place, but I hope that this has helped you. If it has helped you in any way, then that makes me really happy, because there are people out there who think DNFing is a sin, that it's just not something we should do. We should read books cover to cover. We should give a book a chance. Who knows? The second half could be a lot better. And honey, that is totally fine if the second half is going to be better if it's a 200-page book for me. But if I'm reading a 500, 700, 1,000-page book and I'm on page 97 and I'm not liking it, and you're telling me, it's okay, Mr. Francy, just read 400 more pages. Nuts to that. I'm putting the book down because it's just not doing it for me for whatever reason. And there are many reasons why I put down books. It's boring. It's not vibing with me. I really don't like choices that the author is making. It's way too descriptive. I don't like the writing style. It's way too flowery. But they all boil down to the one thing. It's just not working for me. It's just not the book for me. So I'm going to put it down. And there is nothing wrong with DNFing. And anyone who tells you that there is something wrong, well, you know what? Good for them. Don't let that force you. Don't allow that to force you to read something that you're not enjoying. No. No. You put that book down and you pick up a book that you love. To all those people who are watching this who might be in primary school, hi. And if you're in high school, hi as well. And if you're in a situation where you're being forced to read books, I'm so sorry that you are. And my only advice to you, if you're not enjoying the book that you're being forced to read, is to, I know this is going to give you more work and I understand that, but even if you do it right before your school holidays, go into the library and see if you can find a book that you like, borrow that book and read it when you don't have so much homework, and see what that does for you. See what the difference is between reading a book that you're forced to read that you hate versus choosing out a book that you yourself love or love the idea of. If you are new to reading especially, is to rely on the blurb on the back, or the premise, whatever you want to call it, the writing on the back of the book. So there's your front, there's your back. It tells you, well, this is a very long one. So on the back of the book, it will give you a description, a spoiler-free description of what's going on in the book, and that will give you an idea as to whether or not this is going to be the type of book that you like. Work out what type of genre you might want to read, and if you're struggling with what type of genre you want to read, the best thing you can do is think about the type of TV shows or films that you like watching and research what that genre is. Is it a comedy? Wonderful. You're most likely going to be looking for a contemporary. Is it a romance? Great. Books have the romance genre, so look for that. Do you love horrors? Great. We have horror books, so you can read them too. There are many different genres of books out there, and especially with fantasy has multiple subgenres as well. So, you know, it really depends on what you like, but do some research, pick out a book, no matter what age you are, pick out a book and give it a go and see where you go from there. Because one of the most heartbreaking things for me is that when schools set this for the curriculum that the students are forced to read something and they don't like it, it really impacts their view of what reading is. Reading is a chore. I have to pick up a book I don't like. It is a waste of my time. And the reasons go on and on and on. And I am here to say I am so sorry that you had to have that experience in school, because it is not fair. It is not the way that things should be done. And I don't know why the Board of Education thinks it should be done this way. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's absolutely crazy. But please do yourself the favor. Go into a library or a bookstore or wherever you want to go and see if you can find a book that's blurb or premise does appeal to you, and purchase or borrow whatever it is, that book, and give it a go and see what you think. Take your time, set it up in a way that works for you. For me, when I was younger, I used to have a chair that I would sit under the window of my bedroom, draw back the curtains so the sun could shine in. I would have my drink of like my soft drink or soda or whatever you want to call it on me, and just be reading away and just enjoy the moment, because reading can be a very pleasurable experience, but not when you're being forced to read the book cover to cover. So I'm a massive advocate of DNFing, and if you are reading a book right now that you don't like, think of Mr. Francy's advice. Put down that book right now and pick up another one. If you have any comments, thoughts, and or questions about anything I've discussed here, feel free to leave it in the comment section below, and we'll start a discussion over there. But in the meantime, letting you guys go, peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'll see you again soon. Mwah! Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading!